The group of five doesn't get enough love in college football. And today I want to take a look at some of the key results from this past weekend for this group. We'll start with USF and Boise State. USF was a team that had a lot of potential coming into the year, and they absolutely took it to Boise State, took advantage of some turnovers, and really took advantage of that. They were able to put up a big performance from Byron Brown to put up some good points off those turnovers. And this is a team to keep an eye on in the American. They're going to be a competitor, a contender for a conference title. Because of this weekend, we saw a lot of good things. And now suddenly they kind of look like a college football playoff contender. Now, it's going to be tough when they have to play Florida and Miami next, but I'm curious what everybody thinks. Are they actually going to be a contender? If they finish 10-2, we're going to have a real conversation about if USF deserves to be in the college football playoff. A game that was closer than a lot of people realized was Rutgers and Ohio. Now, Ohio, we talked about this coming in the year. I thought that Ohio was going to have some struggles because they had so much roster turnover. The coaching staff is new, and it turns out that could not be further from the case. Parker Navarro is an absolute stud. 21 of 31 for 239 yards and 3 touchdowns, 9 rushes for 93 yards, and 1 more score. Rutgers did not have an answer for this group, and Greg Schiano is a good defensive mind, and they did not have an answer for Navarro for this offense. I think Ohio is going to be just fine in the MAC. It appears that they are still going to be a contender for a conference title, and this one was one of the more surprising results. They obviously come up short, but I thought Rutgers was going to handle this one with relative ease, but Ohio gave them everything that they could handle. ECU and NC State, in terms of intensity, this game lived up to the hype. It lived up to the excitement, and ECU had a chance to potentially tie this game up, and then some questionable play calling ultimately had them falling short. I think ECU is still going to be a really fun team in the American. The American is absolutely stacked this year. I think that the playoff team from the group of five is going to come from that conference. It's just going to be harder because this is such a deep conference. I don't know if we're going to have 1 or 2 lost teams or if everybody's going to be sitting at 3, maybe 4. I don't know. It's a deep conference. It's going to be tough. ECU is definitely part of that as well. Kind of a boring game, if you will. If you like offense, this was not the game for you. Although week 1, it was kind of just full of slow games, low scoring games. Wyoming survives Akron 10-0. And I kind of hinted at this earlier in the offseason. Akron could be a team that, if they can come together and find ways to work with each other, especially being ineligible for the postseason, that's a team that could be a surprise this year. Now, Joe Moorhead kind of needs them to be a surprise, but they could do that. They do come up short. The offense couldn't really get anything going. They had no stop. They had no answer for Christopher Jr. 8 catches for 190 yards and 1 touchdown for Wyoming. He was the biggest difference in this game ultimately. Buffalo kind of got off to a slow start against Minnesota, but their defense played really well. We talked about this when we previewed this game. Minnesota is bringing in a new quarterback. Buffalo's defense is absolutely stacked, and they gave Minnesota quite a bit of a scare. They had Minnesota on the ropes for a little while, and I think that ultimately Minnesota is just too talented to lose this game, but Buffalo did everything they could. A team that is going to be really tough to beat in the MAC. I think could be a 3-team race in the MAC right now, but Buffalo is definitely one of those teams. Western Michigan, the game wasn't really close, but the score kind of makes it look like it is. Now, granted, they did give Michigan State a lot of trouble. Western Michigan is going to be a tough team in the MAC as well. Michigan State not looking as good, but we're not talking about them. Kennesaw State nearly upsets Wake Forest. I thought this was going to be a game in which they find a way to win. They come up a little bit short, but I think you have to feel optimistic if you're Jerry Mack. If you feel like you're a Kennesaw State fan, you should feel better about this team going into 2025. AJ Swan stole the show in the group of five, or maybe not stole the show. I think that he definitely is up there with Byron Brown. They both were able to be in the spotlight and had great performances. Swan went 31 of 46 for 368 yards and 3 touchdowns. Charlotte kind of was in this early on, but it was more because App State did some stupid things. They weren't able to make smart plays, and that game was closer than it should have been. App State was a little bit not paying attention, not focused, and they were able to reel it in, refocus, and take it to Charlotte, take it to the 49ers. So that's a team to keep an eye on in the Sun Belt. UNLV gets its second win of the season, a little bit more comfortable than their week 0 win over Idaho State. They beat Sam Houston 38-21. Anthony Calandria, once again, I said this before the season began, he is the option at quarterback. I don't think they should even consider a quarterback battle at all anymore. It's very clear that he is the option. He is the best quarterback they have on their roster. And if they are going to be a contender in the Mountain West, which, by the way, is wide open now, this is a conference that has a lot of opportunities for teams. Boise State didn't look very good. You're looking, the next game we'll talk about, not a good performance for San Jose State by any means, but UNLV is a team that, even though they started off a little bit slow, could still be a contender. We talked about San Jose State. Central Michigan stuns San Jose State. I don't think a lot of people saw this one coming. The Spartans were expected to make a potential run at the Mountain West Championship, and that still is in the cards technically, but a first game loss against a Central Michigan team that struggled last year is not the way you want to get things going. The defense did its part to keep Central Michigan in check, although at times it looked like Central Michigan's rushing attack was just doing what they wanted against San Jose State, but the offense really is where you need to see some improvement. You need to take care of the football. You need to limit the turnovers. Those were a big concern for this team. Walker Eget has to do a better job of that. We saw some concerns with him last year. Right now, it doesn't look like he's taking that step forward. The Penn State-Nevada game was never really in question. Nevada never really was in it, but they did show some flashes, and Chuba Purdy is going to be really fun. I think he's going to be fun for this team. Great athleticism. If he can kind of refine his passing, it's kind of hard to do that against Penn State, but I do think that he's going to be really fun for Nevada. UTSA had Texas A&M on the ropes for a little bit. You look at what the rushing attack was able to do. Robert Henry Jr., 16 carries for 177 yards, averaged 11.1 yards per carry. If you're Texas A&M, very concerning that your team can't handle a team like UTSA. And ultimately, they do pull away, but the Roadrunners are another team in the American to keep an eye on. I think that they could make a run at the American title, and Jeff Traylor's squad is going to be tough. The defense has some things to sort out. We knew that was going to happen. We talked about that coming into the year, but the offense might be as advertised, and that's really exciting. Then we'll get to the second half of games. Indiana pretty much took care of business against Old Dominion 27-14, but Colton Joseph gave them a scare. Now, he didn't give them a scare as a passer. 11-22 for 96 yards isn't going to scare anybody. 3 interceptions is not great either. But Indiana was worried about his legs. 10 carries for 179 yards and 2 big touchdowns. He did a lot of good things with his legs. You obviously want to see him take care of the football a little bit better. You're not going to win a ton of football games throwing 3 interceptions in a game. So if you're an Old Dominion fan, you should feel pretty good about what this team could be. You just don't want to face another Indiana. And you won't. Eventually, you're going to get to conference play. You will face teams that you have the chance of beating. And if Joseph can be more efficient as a passer and take care of the football, Old Dominion is going to be fun. And we talked about this coming into the year, right? We talked about Old Dominion's ability to surprise people. You have a defense that has a ton of playmakers back. You retained a lot of your key pieces. You didn't see them go to the transfer portal. You have a quarterback with dynamic abilities. You just have to find a way to put it all together. I think this is a team that is going to make a bowl game. You're going up against a team that made the playoff last year, a team that retooled its roster in Indiana, and Old Dominion did a lot of good things. Even if this game wasn't super close, it was still a game that you should be optimistic about this team going forward. Southern Miss, already a better team. Even with a 34-17 loss to Mississippi State, this is a team that is drastically different than the last couple of years. They played with an intensity. They played with passion. They played disciplined at times too. Braylon Braxton gave Mississippi State some troubles. He definitely gave them some issues, and it's going to be fun to see how he plays with this offense going forward. The reigning Sun Belt Player of the Year, he is going to be a big difference maker. I think that the defense did what it could, but ultimately Mississippi State's a little bit more talented than Southern Miss, even with all the talent Charles Huff brought in. That being said, this is a much better team. This is a much better program because of Charles Huff, because of the talent he brought in. And even though they lost in week 1, you already have a reason to be more excited about this team in 2025. FAU started the game strong and then everything kind of derailed. And Zach Kitley's first game wasn't great overall, but it was still something to be excited for. You saw some flashes of what this team could be. Now, Caden Velkamp overall struggled. 30 of 49 for 228 yards, 1 touchdown to 4 interceptions. I think that he is still QB1. I don't have doubts about that, but you are also going up against a Maryland team that looks a lot better than what we anticipated. Malik Washington gave this defense a lot of trouble, and FAU is back to the drawing board. They're going to be a better team, I think, than this one. They just have to find ways to take care of the football. That was a tough one to start the year, but I do like what I see from FAU. Tulane absolutely took it to Northwestern, and we talked about the American and why it's going to be deep. Tulane is a big reason why. This was a team that on the first play smacked Preston Stone. A couple plays later gets its first interception. They forced 5 turnovers, including 4 interceptions of Preston Stone. The defense looked like it was playing mid-season type of ball. They're in mid-season form. John Summerall deserves a ton of credit. Now, whether or not it was the circumstances surrounding the program in terms of, Hurricane Katrina and the memory of that, if the team was playing for its fans, for the city, that's part of it. But I think this is a team that's going to be very fun to watch. Jake Retzlaff clearly is the best option at quarterback, even though he wasn't the best as a passer. 18 of 31 for 152 yards and 1 touchdown. He also had a big touchdown run, ended the game with 10 carries for 113 yards and that 1 score. I think Jake Retzlaff and this offense looked a lot better than I expected. They were playing with a ton of energy, just like the defense. They were playing fast, and they were making some good plays. I thought that they had some really good things to build upon. Obviously, some things to fix, but this is a team that's going to be really fun to watch. Kentucky survives Toledo 24-16. A lot of people thought that the Rockets could pull off the upset here, and they definitely could have. There were definitely opportunities for them to make that happen. But in a game like this, it's not Mississippi State, who you blew out last year. It's a Kentucky team that overall is in a better place, even if they are struggling. Now, if you're Kentucky, you don't love this result. But if you're Toledo, you feel great about this. The MAC is going to be a tough conference to win year in and year out. Toledo expects to be at the top. And we talked about a couple of teams earlier in the video about how they're going to be contenders in this conference. Toledo is another team to keep an eye on with that. They have the talent, they have the ability to make a run, and it's going to be a tough conference to win. They should be able to be up there, though. James Madison takes care of business, 45-10 against Weber State. The big news, though, Alonzo Barnett III is the starting quarterback. We talked about this coming in there. There were some questions about if he was going to be cleared to play, if he was going to be QB1. I've been saying all offseason that he is the best quarterback on this roster. He gives them the best opportunity to win football games. They have a big one coming up that we'll dive into later in the week, but this is a big opportunity for James Madison to make a run. They look pretty sharp against Weber State, took care of business, and it was nice to see Barnett back on the field. It was nice to see George Pettaway be efficient with his carries. Overall, a very good performance by James Madison. The biggest disappointment of week 1 in the group of 5, Middle Tennessee. We had talked about in the offseason how they're only going to go with 2 uniforms. They're trying to save money for NIL to bring players in, and it's clear that there is a lot of work to be done still. We talked about how Derek Mason's team did not play a ton of close games in their losses. They're trying to find ways to do that. I don't know if that changes. You lose to Austin Peay 34-14. That's a terrible way to start your year. That's very disappointing. And Middle Tennessee could be in for a long year if this is kind of a precursor for what we should expect or what we'll see. Utah State survives 28-16 against UTEP. We see Malachi Nelson throw his first touchdown. Finished 22-34, that 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Overall, nothing crazy. Bryson Barnes, 19-28 for Utah State, 233 yards and 1 touchdown. Again, nothing to write home about, but still A win for Utah State gets them back on the winning track, and we'll see how they perform this year. Texas State absolutely puts up a ton of points on Eastern Michigan, 52-27. Brad Jackson named the starter this past week, 18 of 26, 214 yards and 4 touchdowns at quarterback. That'll be fun to watch this offense. We know that GJ Kinney will get explosive play from his offenses. And so far, they're off to a good start. And in the Sun Belt, that's very competitive. You have teams like Southern Miss that'll be better. App State appears to be better. James Madison is on the right track. There are a number of teams that are going to be contenders. Texas State expects to be in that spot. Eastern Michigan didn't go away. It wasn't a close game, but Eastern Michigan kept fighting. They kept competing, and they put up a couple touchdowns late in the game. That's something to keep an eye on for that team. Again, the MAC is going to be a tough conference to win, and not that Eastern Michigan can win it, but they will be a tough team to beat nonetheless. One of the bigger surprises was Fresno State taking it to Georgia Southern, 42-14. I thought that Georgia Southern was going to be a really good team this year, and that still might be the case, but this doesn't give me a ton of confidence. This is a team that had a lot of returning talent. You felt really excited about that, and you knew the defense had its problems, but the offense only putting up 14 points, that's the more concerning part. We knew the defense was going to have some troubles this year, and I didn't think it was going to come against Fresno State, but you knew that they had some deficiencies that needed to be addressed. That being said, only putting up 14 points against that Fresno State team, that is a little bit of a concern. If you're Fresno State, what a way to bounce back. You get absolutely destroyed against Kansas. You look really, really bad, and it's going to be a tough year after week 0. But week 1, you bounce back in a big way. Bryson Donaldson looked really good. I feel like every time I looked up, he was making some sort of big play. EJ Warner, still some things to sort out as a passer. You look at what this team was able to do, the quarterback position is going to have to get better. And I don't know if they're going to move on from Warner eventually if this keeps up, but so far it's not been a great start for him. Rice with a big win over Louisiana, 14-12. It was not a pretty game by either side. It was not the most explosive game, but Rice finds a way to stun a team that won 10 games in 2024. This is a team that in the Raging Cajuns that should be better. Now, Walker Howard did get hurt, so that probably affects this game a little bit. I think that this is going to still be a really fun team to watch in 2025. I think that they're still going to be solid and they'll still be a tough team to beat, but starting the year with a loss to Rice is not obviously ideal. And then the final game that we'll talk about, a late night game if you watched it, Washington beats Colorado State 38-21. Now, I thought that overall this team played a lot better. I think that Braden Fowler Nicolosi has to be more accurate, but he did have some nice throws. He finished 17 of 32, which isn't great, but he did have some nice passes. He did have his wide receivers step up at times. And I think that we talked about how this team could be better than people expect. This is a promising result. Yes, there are things that didn't go well and things that you have to fix. But if you're a Colorado State fan, I think you have to feel overall satisfied with this performance because you weren't going to beat Washington, but you did keep it closer than a lot of people expected. It was close in the third quarter. Then Washington pulls away. Everybody kind of expected Washington to win this game, but Colorado State showed some things that, hey, we have some new talent. We have some new players that are going to be stepping in, but we have guys that are going to make plays, and they did that. And I'm very curious to see how Jay Norvell's squad performs in 2025, but I'm optimistic about this group. I'm curious what you all think. What did you think of the group of 5 this year? I'm hoping to do this series every single week. Take a look at the group of 5. They don't get enough love, in my opinion, and it's a really fun group to pay attention to. There's a lot of exciting teams, and I want to talk about them. So if you guys like that, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, like the video, share the video, comment below which performance you thought was the best.